the most important questions to be discussed here today. But you're absolutely right. I mean, a few years ago, I remember when I'm moderating or talking to people and all that. I mean, most people were clear that India should focus on its strength, which is software. Even in semiconductor, the whole discussion was largely, I mean, most opinion was that stick to software, don't try hardware, don't try manufacturing. So things have changed dramatically in the last few years, driven by, of course, what happened, the semiconductor shortage, the differences between the US and China and all of that. The conversations have changed a lot. Even today, I do find some people saying, yeah, India should probably stick to its advantages in software. But more and more people now beginning to say that, no, we should build a larger semiconductor ecosystem that includes manufacturing. But like you said, I mean, and Anshuman will be able to be a good person to talk about it. But before that, let me introduce Anshuman and Chinnu have a similar trajectory in some ways. Both worked in semiconductor companies, both have been entrepreneurs, both have touched the... Anshuman, you also venture capital and all you dealt with, right?
Yeah. Also for the US government.
And for the US...
As well as for the Indian government.
Okay. Okay. And so, excellent panel here. Two people, I don't even fully understand exactly what they do. I mean, but these are very complex stuff in semiconductor innovations and business. Manu here is based in Switzerland. Gaudhadar is based in Bangalore, doing something around carbon nanotubes, which he tried to explain to me. It's very complex stuff. So let me ask first to all of you. I mean, we are trying to build a larger semiconductor ecosystem. The government now seems fairly clear that we need to go beyond our traditional strengths in software. We've been very good in semiconductor design. The world's biggest companies are in India today, setting up with these big facilities. And some of you have worked, Chinnu started the Scientist Center here. And all of them have a lot of engineers, but mostly working on semiconductor design. But now we increasingly feel the need to build a semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem as well. Anshuman, why don't you start? I mean, in terms of challenges that we have today, what do we need to address to really build this ecosystem?
Thanks, Sujit. And thanks for the introduction, generous introduction. I'll make a disclaimer to start with. As he said, I wear multiple hats on the investment side and policy side for the government and outside the government. Whatever I say today is my personal views, not belonging to any specific government organization or the government per se or any private sector, this thing, my personal views. My first point is arguably semiconductor manufacturing is the most complicated technology on the planet. So understanding the technology is of importance. And till we don't have that, there's a lot of fake news and half news which are doing the rounds. So with that said, I like and really appreciate what Sujit said was that India is now focusing on building a larger ecosystem because many people feel we don't have an ecosystem. I would like to clarify and go on record, India has an ecosystem in manufacturing. India has own space program. We send satellites into space. We have sent probes on Mars and Moon. Many of those semiconductors were built in-house in India. So, and not only were they built in India, there are not that many fabs in the world who can proudly claim that their chips are today sitting on Mars or Moon. So we have an ecosystem, albeit a small one, a very specialized one. We also have gone through issues with sanctions where other countries wouldn't give us technologies, especially after the Pokhran the nuclear detonation, but we sustained through. Where were the semiconductors coming from at that time? So there's a lot that happens in the strategic sector in India and all, which is there. So we have that, and we would like to grow, as Sujit said rightly. So that would be my starting point, and I'm sure I'll elaborate more as the points continue. You want to add to that,
Sure,
Chinnu?
sure. Actually, I think I kind of agree with what Anshuman says. That just to elaborate a little bit about my background, I worked in semiconductor companies in California. I started in Intel and in deep R&D. Then I came back to India about 2005 timeframe. So I had scaled, in the leadership capacity, the SanDisk, which is called Western Digital today. So I have seen this journey for the last 15 years. And what I see is definitely whether do we need the full-fledged ecosystem? Yes, we need that actually. The reason is, if you look at it, the journey, it started with basically design houses, and Anshuman was talking about the space programs where we have done limited ecosystem. But when it comes to commercial products, we did not have the full ecosystem actually. And you cannot be a pure play semiconductor design houses and move up in the value chain actually. So I think the timing is correct. The geopolitical situation, what Sujit was talking about, is correct. And I think for a long time I have been observing this semiconductor story in India, trying to do it for the last 15 years. I think the timing seems to be right, and I think government is also making the right policy decisions. Directionally, we are correct. Okay. And added to that, the geopolitical situation is helping. Okay. So coming back, our strengths and where we need to focus. See, from skills point of view, we definitely established both in complex military technology or commercial electronics, we have emerged. Definitely we are one of the best, there's no doubt. That's what happened in the last 15 years, 20 years and whatnot. It has scaled. If you look at all the major global design centers, they are in Bangalore or Hyderabad or any of these locations actually. I think where we need to add, okay, added to that, the manufacturing story, when I talk about manufacturing for the commercial high volume manufacturing story for India needs and global needs, I think we are going in the right direction. See, the results, we will see it 5 to 10 years down the road, whatever the investments we are making. But I can tell, I was in Silicon Valley just like about a week back. If you talk to the major CEOs, at least they are hearing the right signals. That's what they like to hear. From a policy side, we have signaled it right. Okay. The areas where we need to work on is actually as a community, semiconductor community or electronics community, we need to think about product thinking. See, because we have done semiconductors, but when you talk about a product, you need to think as a holistic product. The software, hardware, the system, everything as a holistic piece. Then only you can move up in the value chain, correct? That is one area we need to work on it. That's one gap. I see that. I'm sure it is achievable, but that's one area. The second one, I think Sujit was talking about software. I think we need to leverage our strength in software, because when you talk about semiconductor, it is not in isolation actually. It has to be coupled with software. Even if you look at, I'm sure many of you must have noticed, NVIDIA has achieved $1 trillion valuation. But what not many people may not know, they have built very good, powerful CPUs for the AI computing, but they also brought all the flows for the AI workflows, which is software. I think we should, whenever we talk about semiconductor story or product, we need to couple strongly with software. You can take Apple model or Android model, but software has to be part of the story. That basically falls into the product thinking. So you have to think about product. That's where we can make it actually. The other area I would like to leave a thought, I think we need to invest in core science. I think my friend actually is into carbon nanotube actually. We need to invest a lot into core science, core semiconductor science and electronics. That's where I think we can move up actually. And the other thing is, I think, Anshuman was talking about semiconductor manufacturing being the most complex. We need to invest a lot in skilling. Skilling is, if you want to build a whole manufacturing ecosystem, we need to invest a lot in the skilling, university level, separately. I think these are the areas I would look at it actually. This is how I see the ecosystem actually.
Okay, before I come to talk to Anshuman on all this, Manu, Gadadhar and Manu, tell me, I mean, what are your principal concerns? Both of you are at a fairly early stage, but you're still, I mean, Gadadhar, of course, has some of your products are already commercialized. Manu is getting there. What are your chief concerns right now?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, this is great, Anshuman and Chinnu. Like it's great points that you're putting out there. Now I see, since I work on the technology side of things, I see technology as something that's very important. So when you look at tech development, like of course India has like some smaller ecosystem that's amazing, but when we look at the technology node of those ecosystems, they're actually way back. Like so we have. So when I speak to my friends at ISRO or ISC, it's generally like, okay, so someone's done this, so we are able to do that, which we know we can do it. We're great at that. But when are we going to be the ones who are leading the pack and saying, okay, now this is way beyond, nobody could think of it, now we have created it. I think that's something that's very critical in any kind of technology. So if we are trying to make, say, the current best node of of electronics today, we've lost the game. We need to target something in the future, and we need to go after that. That's when we're going to catch up or be the leaders within that realm. And tech development often happens in a very weird way. It's like, as Chinnu pointed out, investments in science is something very important. Investments in technology is very important. And also, when you're investing into any of these new technologies, the cost for them is actually going to be very high. In the sense that you need to have a market that's willing to take up such products at the price point where the technology can actually be seeded. One example that comes to mind is I was chatting with a few folks in the Silicon Valley, and I was asking them like, hey guys, like you guys made transistors, and you made solid state transistors. Who did you sell it for, and who was willing to buy it from you? And then like we spent a couple of years, we couldn't figure out any users because vacuum tubes were already cheaper, they were already better, and nobody wanted the solid state devices. But then we ended up finding that the army and the military, they wanted the chips, they wanted the transistor, because they could increase the payload of their weapons on the missile, and the vacuum tubes were occupying more weight, and they were willing to pay $20,000 per transistor. Now that's a huge amount. Like today, like my phone has 1 billion transistors, and they were paying $20,000 per transistor, and so that is the kind of thing that set off the play where people were able to develop an advanced piece of tech, and there was someone who was willing to buy that tech. Now within India, even though there have been a lot of programs that are now opening up, there have been in the past couple of years, there have been tremendous amount of programs to encourage defense purchases, but the military is still not ready. It's often like when you go with a product, it'll be like, okay, show me the specification. And when you read the spec document, it's a UK spec or a Russian spec. And it's like, okay, so we don't have a spec because it's new, that we don't know what to do. That's where we are. That's one big change that we'll have to make. So so tech development with something where we're targeting the future and building out things from now to target and be the leaders in that future is what's very critical and important.
Okay, we'll try and get some answers from Anshuman and Chinnu on that. But Manu, tell, what are your concerns?
Yeah, sure. Um, Thank you all. So as background, I run a startup called Synthara in Zurich, and we work on basically making processor solutions 50 times more efficient. So we provide the technology that enables ST micros, TIs to make their chips more efficient, while also providing the software infrastructure needed to make that transition, because they sell to billions of use cases and you don't want them to rewrite all the software. That's context. Before that, I was working in Bangalore for some time. Now, my opinion is that today's semiconductor industry globally is in a moment of inflection. The political scenario is one piece, but just technology-wise, there is a lot of pressure in really keeping the pace that the industry has built on, which is actually an opportunity. It does not necessarily mean that what will be more successful in 5 years, 10 years is what was done in the past. It could very well be that your nanotubes become the thing. But as you kind of hinted at, my feeling is it's typically a bad strategy to try and jump onto a battle where there are 200 players already. Almost every government in the world is worried about chips, security, reliability, and they are investing a lot of money, often more than the 20 billion that our government has put on it. So I feel that we need to pick specific niches where we have strengths. Obviously, we can do design, but it could be that someone has invented a carbon nanotube, which is amazing, and there is a very specific use case where we can make a big impact and kind of corner that market and build on top of that. That would be my preferred strategy here. Obviously, it's a very it's not a comfortable option for politicians because they can't say it's going to be this big. But I think that's where we will likely be successful. And manufacturing is actually a very important piece here because it's not just about the strategic importance, it actually creates a lot of jobs. ST Micro employs, I think, I forgot the numbers, but 80% of their people are actually in the factories. So there is also a job creation aspect to manufacturing. So there is obviously a need to do it, but I think trying to do it in an unprofitable manner where we are just competing for cost may not be the best strategy for India. The other thing that I think is also important is early stage funding. The thing that I was very curious about, again, your story is how you managed to do that for 12 years in India. I think that's actually remarkable, and that should not be a requirement for a founder. He should not have to beg and scrap and figure out very weird things to survive for 12 years to get a revolutionary technology in place. And getting the ecosystem to support that, either through private investments or through government grants or whatever it might be, is something that India, I don't know if it's doing well, but it's certainly happening very well in the ecosystem I am currently based in. So in Switzerland, I have raised a lot of money without even a product. It's basically a pitch. And they trust you enough that, okay, if the money is gone, that's fine, but go ahead and try. That I think is something that is actually not expensive because you are really talking about billions and billions. These guys don't need so much. You give a couple of million and they do a lot of work. So that would be my thoughts on this topic.
Anshuman, I mean, you are with the government now. I mean, Chinnu made some very interesting points, some of the things that we need to address. We have fantastic companies like Gaudhadar's and Manu's. What can we do for companies like those? But before that, I mean, how are you addressing some of these issues?
So, as you know, the Indian government has come out with this 76,000 crore package scheme focused only on manufacturing and semiconductors, the complete ecosystem. There's PLI, production linked incentive, and there's a design linked incentive, DLI. And then we are also looking at, a fab, international player of repute, and somebody with, proven technology to come in and set up house. So the government of India is working very hard to make that happen. And I would like to actually answer that question from a different hat I used to wear when I was in business school. I did my business school at Stanford. I was part of the team of students that started the incubator StartX. And we incubated companies which were eventually bought by Apple and Google and all. But what we always advised the entrepreneurs at that time was look for investment from the venture capitalist and an angel investor in your sector than going into money coming from the government sector, because the money is different. The government gives money and that's the end of it. But when a venture capitalist gives you money and he or she is from the industry, like Chinnu right here. If I start a startup and I go to Chinnu and Chinnu gives me $500 million,
He'll keep a close eye on you.
Not only he'll keep a close eye, he will open a lot of doors for me.
Okay.
He has people in the industry that he is friends with, people from his companies that he has worked with, who, if I'm getting stuck somewhere, I can go to Chinnu and he'll just pick up the phone and he'll say, Mr. So-and-so, remember back in the day when we were having that thing and blah, 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 we had this problem. I got a youngster who's got a similar problem. You mind giving him 5 minutes? Now, if Chinnu was not in the picture, that would never happen for two reasons. First, the young entrepreneur would not even know how and where to find that individual. And secondly, if he did, he would be lost in the inbox. His email would just drown. So yes, you can get money, and you should get money from the government because the government is incentivizing this whole sector. But that does not mean that money is the best you can do in building your startup. Even the US, when I was working, I would be panelist for the Small Business Innovative Research SBIR program, which is the seed fund of America as it's marketed. And I focus on semiconductors out there. I would tell, a lot of the entrepreneurs that ask me, well, we can get phase one, phase two, we can get so many, $75,000 or, $250,000, $500,000. How good is that? I say the same thing. Everywhere, governments are the same. When the government officer gives you money, you can't go back to him and say, I'm having this problem in my sales team. Can you help me out? He said, why are you coming to me? I give you the check. That's all I can do. He is not from the industry. But Chinnu is. And Chinnu's colleagues who are venture capitalists understand. And they can also sit on the board of the company and help direct. No, don't go into that area. They can leverage their institutional knowledge. So there's a lot more you can get with the help, and we really in India appreciate people like Chinnu being there to take this forward. We are providing the backup support, so to say, but these are the people who are taking it forward. And let me again emphasize what Gaudhadar is working on, gate all around, right? So you're doing carbon nanotubes which is going to be in 2 nanometer and all, which TSMC is working on. TSMC is one of your customers, if I'm not mistaken. There are only 2 companies in the world who are doing this. Extreme ultraviolet, 2 nanometers, 3 nanometers, and lower. And there are only 2 companies, Samsung and TSMC. And Gaudhadar is sitting right here in Bangalore amongst us and providing them with one of the key technologies. So the biggest market cap in semiconductor manufacturing, TSMC and Gaudhadar. That's the pairing I want you to appreciate about India. Go ahead.
Great. Great points. Before I come to Chinnu to respond to that part of it, what the gentleman was asking, Anshuman, what is the status of these big projects? I mean, we all want that semiconductor fab and all that, but there seems to be still, even though you announced, what, 20,000 crore or something? What? Will it happen? How long will that take?
Okay, so to answer the question, will it happen? It will happen, and it bloody will happen. We are here to make it happen, and everybody in the semiconductor community in India want India to come up as a good source in the supply chain of semiconductors. Now, there are applications in the process. It's not right for me to comment on the application process because that belongs to a ministry and it's inside that ministry. I'm not the right person to answer that. But I can say that, reiterating the fact is the most complicated and complex technology on the planet. So it is not wrong, or I would say it is in fact prudent on the part of the officials to double check, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, they know what is going on. You don't want to have a situation where you realize afterwards it's an oops situation. To add to that, the Indian ecosystem, like in Semiconductor Complex Mohali, we use 180 nanometers for the space program. And we use that because that's one of the proven technologies, as Gaudhadar had rightly pointed out. You don't want to send a satellite or a spacecraft to Mars or Moon and say, sorry, I left a bug in there. Can you have it back, please? Can I send somebody with Zomato to go and fix it? No. You can't do that. So you are very sure that everything is working, there's no bug, and the best way is that you use a technology which is a little on the conservative side. But that does not mean that 180 nanometers is not a technology which is not of use. Even TSMC has a sizable percentage today which is churning out 180 nanometer technology chips. There are other companies which are focused just on 180 nanometers in Taiwan and in other countries. Does that answer your question?
Okay. And before getting there, I mean, the intermediate stages, is there a significant progress there?
There's absolutely a lot of progress there. And apart from the progress, there's a lot of realization of progress. We many times don't know what we have. And that's an interesting point, and I would like to use this platform to bring that out. When you say a fab semiconductor design ecosystem and semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem, what is the difference? For the layperson, let me give an analogy. In the real estate construction business, there is an architect who gives you a blueprint. He designs what the building would be like, how many floors, what it would be like. And then there is a builder. You take that blueprint and you go over to somebody, some builder like JP and Gore, and there are big builders out there, Ansals, who will do the building for you. So there's a builder and there's an architect. So the chip design part, the fabless part, is the architect. He sits in a nice air-conditioned room on a computer using software and design something, and the output of that is in a format which is traditionally called GDS2, the standard format, just like for paper documents, we have PDF, you can send a PDF file across. We have GDS2, and that GDS2 goes to the fab, to the builder. And now builder builds it. Now the builder who builds it is not sitting in an air-conditioned room with computers. He's got mortar, bricks, RCC, all kinds of wood, cement coming into the picture. The same way in a fab, there are a lot of consumables which are used. The top number one is sulfuric acid. India is one of the top 3 or top 4, depending on which year and which data you look at, one of the top exporters of sulfuric acid. Now I'll give another example, more critical example. In the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Mariupol and Odessa, 2 cities in Ukraine were destroyed. Those 2 cities had specific manufacturing units which made a gas called neon. Neon is an ingredient like salt in food for making semiconductors. There is no neon, there is no fab running. 90 or 92% of neon supplied to American semiconductor manufacturers came from Ukraine. The moment that supply stopped, the price of neon shot up in the international market 9 times, 900%. Neon is a byproduct of steel making. Its neon is extracted from air. Air has 0.0018% of neon. So we extract from the air, which is a unit called the air separation unit. Every steel manufacturing plant has one. India is the 2nd largest steel producing country in the world. We have had neon in our back gardens for decades. And what do we do with that neon? We don't have a supply chain because we were not plugged into that system. Our Indian industrialists were more focused on steel. What did we do? What did we do with that neon? We just throw it back into the air. So we recycle it back. We take it off, we extract it, and we recycle it back. When I spoke to some of the guys, I said, sir, what do you do with your neon? So there's no demand for it, so we let it go back. So now that the price has gone up 9 times, suddenly there's a demand for neon. And India has the opportunity to be the neon capital of the world. If we are the 2nd most steel and refinery producing, oil refining country right now. The world's largest air separation unit is in Jamnagar, Gujarat, run by Reliance. You can Google it. So we have a lot of infrastructure on the manufacturing side. We have just not stitched it together to do the semiconductor part of it, and we have not plugged ourselves for legacy reasons, lack of information reasons, or better opportunities in other places. Now that semiconductor has become an area of importance, all this starts to come into play. So do we have an ecosystem? It's debatable. We have an ecosystem, but we have the systems, but they have not been, the eco part is missing.
So Neon, we have not yet started supplying to the US, is it?
I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. I don't know.
Sure. Okay. Chinnu, I mean, you are a funder. You also prefer, even when you fund semiconductor companies, those that have a good software connect. What is your feeling? I mean, how is the environment for funding semiconductor startups? The returns on them? Are you excited?
Sure. Before that, I'll just complete the answer because I'm also part of the investment committee member in the DLI scheme, in the MAITI. Okay, so there's a PLI and DLI. So just to let you know how much progress, we already approved 6 or 7 applications, I can't remember, where the money has been sanctioned. Okay, so it is moving. It's definitely moving. Just to let you know, it is happening. It's real. I think Minister Rajesh Chandrasekhar had come to Bangalore 3 months back. He has given the money, each of them 15 crores, up to 15 crores. So you have PLI, which is for the heavy lifting of the fab and everything. The DLI is for the design ecosystem. Okay, like for example, if you do innovative PCB design where you don't need to depend on Taiwan, they get funded. So the criteria here is not to look for returns. I think, if you look at it, the philosophy, I think that's what Anshuman was talking. Government should focus on investing into, ecosystem building, where you should not expect returns. Whereas VC funds or investors look on returns actually. So I think this is going in the right parallel movement. Okay, so I think what they are doing is correct. The PLI is correct for the heavy lifting because private investors may not come to that because it's already an well-entrenched area. Somebody has to build a fab, they would look for return on investment, and it may not be to the level of what people are expecting. So government has to give that nudge in the form of subsidy and everything. I think they're doing it right, well thought out. Okay. The question, I think you were talking whether, I think one of you were telling that, whether we should build a fab or not, 7 nanometer, this debate keeps on going. There are pros and cons for both. Because whenever you talk about a new nanometer, which is about 2 nanometer or 5 nanometer, I can't remember nowadays, but I'm a little out of touch. To build a new state-of-the-art fab, it costs like about 7 billion, I think, if I'm right. So you need to have demand, you need to understand it's a commercial project. So I think the bottom line is any time private investor comes into play, they will look for the commercial viability and returns. So I think this is all the dilemmas people look at it. But I think what is happening in PLI and DLI scheme, I can tell you that being part of this, I can officially speak. I'm in the MAITI IC committee. It's in the right direction. So coming back to your question, where do I see opportunities? See, I think when you look at private investment, that's one thing I learned, or I'm forced to learn with investors. You have to make returns for your investment. It can be a public investment or private investment. There is a private equity investment, there is a VC investment, typically early stage private equity is like little larger investments. At the end of the day, when you get money from private equity, private money, the returns are the supreme. They dictate everything actually. Because of that, so you have to make sure whatever the money you get it from investors to be returned, your entire project should be thought from a commercial angle. And even for deep tech projects like yours, there is room. There is a type of investor who specializes that. So I think Anshuman was talking about it. First of all, when you are looking for fund, you need to make sure you go to the right VC or right investor. That's very important. And actually, in fact, a smart entrepreneur does not look only money, looks for all the benefits he talked about, the ecosystem connects and everything. So I think government money, you should tap into it wherever possible. But I think, you need to go to the right type of private investors actually, right? That's just, I want to put this thing, so it is very important. Coming back to where do I see opportunities in semiconductor? Is there opportunity to invest? Yes. Actually, off late, in the last 1 year, especially with the generative AI, there has been lots of interest into semiconductor actually. Okay, but if you look at the cycle of venture investment, 90s there were a lot of investments. Then actually 2000 time frame there was not much of investment. Again with the AI, I'm talking about 2010 time frame, the investment picked up momentum in the semiconductor. So we invested in an AI chip company which does AI edge computing. This is a US company founded by two Stanford PhDs, and one of the co-founders in Hyderabad. They actually did the chip. Actually, TSMC is one of the investors in the company. So anyway, so there is a lot of investment happening.
Synthara, I think.
Yeah, it is happening right now. Kinara, right? It is happening. So again, coming back to the opportunity areas which are propelling investments into semiconductor, there are 2, 3 I can think of it. The AI computing. The AI computing is demanding a new architecture. Maybe in the data center or in the edge or the software play. So there is a lot of demand for AI computing. The nature of AI computing will vary, so there is opportunity for startup opportunities. The second one, I would say, auto and EV. And so we have invested in electric vehicle, and we have two investments, one in battery, the other one is actually into motors actually. But even 5, 6 years back, the amount of electronics gone into autos have increased. If you look at luxury vehicles, probably about 30% electronics today. And so that is continuing. And in addition to that, with EV coming into picture, you need battery management chips, you need all kinds of chips for EV actually. So if you probably strip electric vehicle, good amount of electronics go into it actually. Even the motors are controlled by very precise electronics and software. So I do see this auto/EV is a big investment area. If there are startups working on it, that is good actually. The third one, which I think what IIT Madras is doing, they are pushing for it actually, the RISC-V architecture. So if you look at it, though we established as the design powerhouse in India, the IPs come from outside of India. And there is huge opportunities to do IPs in India in a cost-effective manner. You can strip out a lot of things, and we can do good IPs. Because just to give an idea, like recently we taped out one chip, like along the lines what Anshuman was talking about. This went to TSMC. The total cost of the tape out was about roughly $5 million. In TSMC, I think this is probably, 18 nanometer or 14 nanometer, I can't remember that. And I'll tell you why it is 14 nanometer. So we don't necessarily need to go to 2 nanometer, 7 nanometer. It will become a vanity project. So we need to choose the right node actually. So out of the 5 million cost, which got manufactured in TSMC, TSMC paid some amount because they are an investor, but good amount of money went into IP. Okay, even if you're doing design in India, lots of IP come from Taiwan or maybe different parts actually. This is an area India can invest. If there is a startup coming out of it, there is a huge scope for it. Then the other thing I talked about is software angle. When I say software, I'm not talking about the application software, the software which is fitting into the full stack. These are the 4 or 5 areas I am really interested. And of course, if there are any exotic ideas, we also look at it actually. Okay.
So gestation period, normally what
No,
returns?
we are okay with that because we figured that it would take time. So typically our gestation cycle in an investment can be 5 to 7 years. But what we do is we invest in pre-series A. It goes to A, B, C. Probably we start exiting C level. Many times the semiconductor startups, they get acquired actually. That's how it works. A big company comes and looks at it and they say that this technology could not be done, and so they acquire actually. So most of the semiconductor startups, they get acquired actually because I'm very convinced, having worked in big companies, it's very hard to come up with innovation speed like in startup, because once a company becomes 2,000, 5,000, you cannot compete with a startup which is like a 100 people startup actually. So that's what this Kinara has done. They have beaten very big companies in this space with 100 people. They were able to come up with a chip and working in the first stepping, probably I'm sure all of you can appreciate in the A1 stepping, which could not be done in a big company. So I do see these 4 or 5 areas, basically AI computing, auto, EV, then IP, risk kind of IP, or even other IPs, then software. These are the 4 or 5 areas I'm really interested, and which are attractive from VC investment areas. And when we look at investment, we look at a potential that companies should, at least in theory, should give 10x return. Okay, then only it makes sense for me to go and invest in a company, because when I invest in 10 companies, as Anshuman knows, probably 2 or 3 are multi-baggers. So I need to see potential. Whether it happens or not, that's different. The market size and everything. So that's where VCs come into a play, because we take the idea and we help them to productize to the global market actually. So, yeah, any questions? Happy to take it as well.
So why did the Americans lose out on chip things? Intel and all. I mean, they were far ahead in the game at the point of time.
I actually, I don't know about, I worked in Intel for 10 years, but I wouldn't speak for Intel, because Intel is probably not in the, he left. I left 15 years back, almost 15 years
Both
back.
of them left.
Right. No, actually, even today, US has definitely the advantage in the semiconductor. I think where, all these geopolitical tensions are coming from, China is also rising, okay? So political thing we'll talk separately, but I think US wants to keep it within themselves, that is one. And on other side, China is coming up with similar capability, but not necessarily in equal level. So I wouldn't say US has lost out. US definitely has lots of edge in the semiconductor, but they want to protect it actually, I would say.
You mentioned the geopolitical thing. Will the silicon shield hold? I mean, of Taiwan. I mean, that's
The silicon shield for America will hold?
no of Taiwan.
Of the?
Of Taiwan.
Of the
Taiwan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting one actually, because I met somebody from ITRI. ITRI is an organization you must have heard, which built the semiconductor ecosystem. I think, where it is coming, the advantage for India is, 60-70% of the hard manufacturing, what I think Anshuman was talking about, Qualcomm chips goes to TSMC, Broadcom chips go to TSMC, they give the design, the blueprint, the TSMC manufactures the hard part. 60-70% of over the last 20-30 years have moved to TSMC, because US for some reason didn't want to keep all this manufacturing. Okay, that's changing now. Okay, so because of that, all the manufacturing capability rested with I wouldn't say all, good chunk of it went with Taiwan. Now because of this geopolitical issues, because China's trying to do something in that area, I think all the major companies are worried that if something happens today, if Taiwan gets attacked, the semiconductor supply chain is crippled actually, correct? So now people are realizing next 3 to 5 years we don't want to depend on Taiwan, so they are building the manufacturing, the manufacturing what Anshuman was talking about in US itself. That's what US passed, that CHIPS Act. They want to bring it back, and Intel is betting a lot on that, because they realize that there is a good business out there actually. So I think yes, this geopolitical the geopolitical tension has been reconfiguring the supply chain. I think if India moves it right, and I think it could be a beneficiary of it actually. And second thing is, as a sovereign nation, we need to have the capability. What if somebody says that I'm going to stop supplying your semiconductor tomorrow, like what happened in this Pokhran and everything, right? We should not end up having similar situation. So I think for 2 reasons, India should pursue the semiconductor manufacturing. One, for its own sovereign protection. The second, for the reason there is a good opportunity, because the geopolitical tensions are shifting the supply chain. I hope that answered your question.
So now let me clarify a few points on what Chinnu was just saying. That is one side of it, but why Intel and AMD lost out on the higher end technology is a very, very interesting part and very less known part of it. The importance in here, from an investor perspective, you'll be able to appreciate is, as I said at the start, it is the most complicated technology. Even at the top of these manufacturing firms, there has to be a leader who has gone up the chain of chip design or manufacture and all. And I say this because Intel and TSMC were neck and neck when they were at the helm of getting into the EUV technology nodes. The CEO of Intel left. They had some reasons, I don't know. But the CFO became the CEO. He came from a financial line, not from the technology line. And that is when Intel started to flounder with its technology. It went on till the level that the stock price of Intel started to tank, and an activist investor bought enough stock to come into the company and kick out the CFO turned CEO and brought in the first, brought in a full technology guy called Pat Gelsinger, who had actually left and gone into VMware. He brought Pat back into the system, and Pat is the one who got Intel back into the game. Similar situation happened with AMD. They had a non-semiconductor guy at the helm, and things went in a different direction. So it is very, very important that the head of these high technology, high investment, high risk activities are headed by people who have had, experience in the game, who've, built this technology and build their own careers up in this technology itself. Till you don't have that, just on working on hearsay will always create situations. So that was the reason why that happened. And TSMC, for example, the father of their semiconductor business in Taiwan, Morris Chang,
PhD.
those guys, and and he's also from Stanford, my school. So, but coming back to the point that you need a guy in the technology to keep it going. Thanks.
Right, excellent point. I completely agree with you. I didn't want to say in public, but one of the reasons, because since I left Intel about 18 years back, the reason why it floundered, because after Andy Grove, this is my reasoning, okay, I mean, I'm not a spokesperson. After Andy Grove left, or maybe a few others later, they brought sales and finance people. Before the CFO Bob Swan, before that there was another gentleman, Paul Atlee, who was sales. Usually the sales and finance professionals, they tend to take short-term decisions. Whereas in any technology, you need a long-term decision makers who can think 5 years, 7 years. One of the reasons AMD turnaround, Lisa Su, she's a PhD. And you look at Jensen in an NVIDIA, he's also techie. So it's very clear if you're looking at tech companies, actually you need that kind of visionary CEOs who can think beyond quarterly financial results. Thanks, that was a good explanation.
Okay, maybe Pat will bring that difference.
Sure.
Any questions? We're running out of time.
Is this something that you build in when you're thinking about these schemes to promote the industry in India? I mean, the people that are at the helm of it who are building it out, because considering the amount of investment that is required beyond what is supported by the government is also coming from large business houses who may probably haven't had the opportunity to kind of see this sort of technology development, although they have invested a lot of money, build their own businesses in their own way. But is something like that is also a part of consideration when you
You're talking about the government scheme?
I mean, when you're giving out the PLI and DLI.
Sure. I can probably take that one. So that's why the government has done, because the nodal agency for the DLI scheme, I don't know about the PLI, I'm sure there is a similar setup. The nodal agency is CDAC, but it is basically run by expert committee members. There are 6 or 7 members, including myself. There are 2 IIT professors, 2 from venture capital, and 2 from industry. One, I think, from Intel and one from semiconductor company. So it's a mix of this committee, basically gives the overall direction, the CDAC implements. I think they have done a very good thing compared to the past, these kind of schemes where the bureaucrats may not know how to do it, okay? So they have selected professionals from industry background, that too again not only semiconductor. So we see professors, two IIT professors, which is futuristic. So they have done a very good job actually. I would say a very good job actually.
I'm just wondering that one is of course about fab, other is about the machinery that helps you, set up the fab. Players like ASML, and I'm just wondering that we have like choking points around, chip manufacturing. Do you also see a little bit of a distributed supply chain around machinery, the ones that, for example, ASML makes?
Do you want to take
The machinery around ASML makes for EUV, ASML is the only company which does. And so that is a catch out there. But if you come down to DUV, there are multiple players in the market. And Nikon is one of the competitors of ASML. And so there are players in the market, and I'm sure there are more players coming up. We keep hearing that in social media there are some companies even in China which are now coming to the DUV competitive manufacturing. So there are companies out there which are doing that. But apart from that, that very specialized piece of equipment which is called the lithography equipment, in the other sectors, there are a lot of other companies which are also, there are competitors which are coming up. Even in India, at the lower level of the spectrum, so you've gone on to the ultra specialized side of it. If you come on the lower side of the spectrum, there are Indian companies which are also starting to compete. Even at in the Indian fabs, strategic sector fabs and all that we have, there are Indian companies which are now being incentivized in the Atmanirbhar Bharat policy bandwagon. So there is work going on, but technology in many ways is super specialized. And many times, from an entrepreneur perspective, because I have been one myself in semiconductors in the high end, it is many times also access to a customer, and the customers are very few in number. So so if he makes something which is carbon nanotubes, how many companies will buy right now? So he might be able to sell to 3 companies and maybe 6 labs. It's a super specialized area. And in that super specialized customer base, there are other reasons why you might be wanting to stay in the business. So I buy from company X, I buy 5 equipment from them. Here's one they give on a trial basis. It's easier for them to invest. It's easier for me to utilize. As it is, I have confidence with them. Because any small variation inside the fab can have a big difference. 2 nanometers. What is the width of your human hair, do you know? The 2 nanometers is like 1/20th the width of a hair or something like that. I mean, I don't have the exact number. But we're talking about things that's small. In many fabs, they have pedestrian one-way streets because they want to maintain the flow of air. So they have the air to be, you can't go halfway through and say, oh, let me turn around. No. You can't turn around because you don't want to create air turbulence. So these are all very specialized things. You wear specific suits, you go inside rarefied atmospheres. So it's, trust is also a major factor. So getting in a new player into the system, you have to break that glass ceiling of trust also, which is a much bigger problem in here than in any other industry. Thanks.
Such a complex industry. But that is the question. I mean, do we have, to all of you, does India have the talent for this kind of complex work, especially in the manufacturing side and all of that? What do you, Manu, Gaudhadar, a quick response? I think we have to vacate this hall soon.
India does. So what I've seen is any technology is really a process of iterations. The more number of iterations you carry out, you can crack anything. And so the iterations coupled with like figuring out the market. So when you look at tech developments anywhere on the planet, it's really a very small group of people, 2-3 people who are just super passionate about it, continue working on it, and start making some money from it. That's when investments start pouring in. And every piece of tech, if you were to trace it back, you'll always find that it's small groups. It's never like a planned governmental program that's creating technology. That happens after someone else has created the technology and you have a roadmap to do that. So that exists, that's possible, we can do that. and the principles are the same. That's what I've seen in my journey too. That we're making stuff that's about 2 lakh times smaller than a hair strand. We are making it with the repeatability of 2 atoms. We are doing it in Bangalore, and this we bootstrapped our way to this. Now, if I can do it here, like anybody can do any of that stuff. It's not impossible at all.
That's encouraging to hear. Manu?
I agree with you, and the only thing I would say is somebody should also be desperate for that technology. End of the day, you do all these crazy things. It has its limitations because it's just starting out, and it's very good in one thing, and it's probably not so great at other things because you're not trying to optimize for that. But there is somebody there who is desperate for this. For example, for us as well, they are looking for energy efficiency. The cost of compute is exploding, Moore's law is ending, blah, blah, blah. And they really want to figure out how to make their next great product. And they are willing to make some sacrifices on everything else if they can get to that topic. So as long as we are solving somebody's pain, we can do that. And yeah, talent-wise, I don't think we have any shortage. It's mostly the hard infrastructure that's bottlenecking us at the moment, I think.
Yeah, Chinnu, Anshuman, any?
So are you talking about the talent-wise?
Yeah.
I think definitely.
More for the manufacturing side. On the design side, of course.
So the manufacturing, I do agree with Gaudhadar actually that anything in the world, it's the matter of iterations. But having said that, the world doesn't wait for all the iterations. So when it comes to manufacturing, for the semiconductor fab, we need to work on it. It will take some time, but I think we are in the right direction. But for the equipments, I think that's a very, very specialized. I mean, if semiconductor manufacturing itself is specialized, I'm quite familiar with these companies like KLA, Tenkar, ASML. These are all companies who are super specialized with guys who work on PhD, and most of them are PhD. I think we don't have the skill set today in India. We don't have the skill set today. Let's be very clear, okay? And whether we need to get into that area, that's a commercial discussion to be done actually. We don't have the skill set. Whether we can do it or not, yes, if you put money, work on 10 years, 50 years, yes, you can get that. But, you cannot work on everything, right? I mean, like, there's no need to work on also.
So I beg to differ from on what he's saying. And I think even though I differ, I think we're both saying the same thing, but the perspective is different. India does not have that many fabs. So they're not Indians working in India who have the fab experience and are doing this work. Outside India, there are enough fabs with enough Indians working all over. You go to Malaysia, you look at the fabs in Taiwan. There's a sizable amount of Indians you go in who work in there. I started my career with ST Micro in France back in the day, where we used, as a vegetarian, I had to go figure out which is a vegetarian restaurant, and I could not find food. But then over the years, when I go now, I see, I'll give you a very simple example. I was there for the Paris Air Show in 2017, and my laptop plug was different. And there's a guy walking in front of me speaking in Punjabi in Paris. I didn't have to speak one word of French to find out a shop which could sell me a converter for my laptop charger. So that way, Indians have now, they're all over the world and in every sector. So fabs in the US, fabs in Europe, fabs in the Southeast Asia have a lot of people who are there. Once we have fabs in India, many of them would love to come back and come join the system here, because obviously, as you start to get senior in your system, I mean, you also have aging parents, and we have a cultural system where we take care of our elders, and also many of them want to come back, and many of them want to keep their roots in here. So we do have, but not in India.
Yeah, I
Indians.
qualify. Yeah, basically Indians in India does not have it. The Indian diaspora has it.
Diaspora.
And many of them maybe will
Correct.
come
For
back.
example, the Western Digital
Yeah.
fab is run by Siva Sivaram. Okay. And
Sanjay
similarly,
Malhotra
Sanjay Malhotra is running the Micron. He's a fab. He's a manufacturer. I mean, he has good understanding about it. And many fab heads of US companies, or even the manufacturing, the equipments, the KLA, Tenkor, all those things, there are a lot of Indians. The Indian diaspora has it, The Indians in India don't have it right now.
Also, I think the flash or the DRAM was invented by Sartaj Sani, who's an Indian guy. So we have Indians in this area very well entrenched in the international ecosystem. And so if we need talent, we need to grow talent. We want to have them come back. We shouldn't have a problem. Once the eco part of the system starts to come in, the system is there, the eco needs to be added, and then everything will start fitting into place.
Okay.
So I have one question.
Yeah, nobody's asking us.
I think the lady had a question. Ma'am, you had a question first?
Yeah, I did have a question. Thank you. I'll make it really quick. It was about, it maybe for Mr. Senthilkumar or Mrs. Bhatti. What about the reserves of lithium that have been discovered in India? Do you think their scale is large enough to sort of offer us a competitive advantage or meaningfully change our position in sort of semiconductor?
So yeah, maybe.
Good.
Okay, so I think the lithium dependency is not there for semiconductor, but whereas it is for the EV. So we have investments we have in the EV battery. But let me break a myth, like what Anshuman was talking about. Even EV, there is a little bit of a myth. Lithium is required, but there are other materials required in an EV battery, like aluminum, like copper, but you need battery grade. Okay, that whatever what we found in lithium in India, it is yet to be confirmed. But setting aside, we need to work on aluminum. We produce a lot of aluminum in India actually, but they are not battery grade aluminums. Okay, it has to go to some other country and come back actually. I think if you find lithium, it's well and good, but the other materials which are needed for the EV battery, like aluminum, copper, nickel, cobalt, there are many materials, okay? Correct, there are many materials which is available in India and we produce them, but only thing is we have not produced, like he was talking about the neon story. So we produce, but without even understanding it is required for other needs actually. So this supply chain mapping is definitely important activity India has to take care of it. That's I think a lot of things. It was a revelation for me also because every newspaper was talking about India does not have a lithium. Because of that, our EV growth is going to be stunted. Actually, that is one aspect of it, but I don't think it is not that bad as made it to be. Yeah. You can recycle the lithium, but the bigger dependency is on all other materials which occupies the battery. If you take a battery and strip it out, 80% by weight, not necessarily cost probably, is aluminum, nickel, cobalt, all those things actually, which is available in India, but not necessarily in the battery grade. So I hope that answered actually.
So
Sir,
it's
I have one
basically,
question.
so it's basically that the processing part, that part has to be brought in-house, and then we'll be a little more Atmanirbhar, so to say. So the self-sufficiency part, many of the raw resources that we have, that the processing or the last mile processing is the key part which is keeping it from happening.
So during semiconductor manufacturing, so post lithography and etching and masking, doping, all of that, there are significant amount of turnkey operations also that takes place, right? Like verification and also packaging. So while shifting the entire manufacturing of semiconductor to India, are we also focusing on these shifting turnkey operations also to India? Or are we going to depend on Taiwan and China, Indonesia for these semiconductor turnkey operations?
Okay, I'll answer that question. What makes you think that those activities are not happening right now in India?
So most of our, I work in mapping out the supply chains for even semiconductor companies.
Okay.
So most of the suppliers that we have mapped out for, right, have a lot of presence in that region, while happening in India is a bit less compared to that.
Have you seen companies like Tessolve?
Yes, come across.
So they do testing. They bought out a company which was in I think Singapore or somewhere. So packaging, there was a company I think here in Bangalore or Chennai called Spell. So packaging is something which happens in India. testing is something which happens in India. I think it makes me a little uncomfortable because it is fashionable to say India does not have something. It is fashionable to say we don't do something and then not do anything. I would never say this when I was a youngster. But now when you become a parent age and you have kids who fall prey to this thing, in India we don't do this, therefore I need to go to the US. You are not doing, you didn't get the grades right in your SAT or GRE, and now you want to go and do something. The same situation happens on a more generic level. I mean, don't take it personally, it's nothing to say to you. It is fashionable to say India doesn't have an ecosystem. It is fashionable to say India doesn't do packaging. I just gave you an example. Were we packaging these things in North Korea, which we've sent to Mars and Moon? We have our own packaging. SCL does packaging. Spell does packaging. There are other 2 small companies which are doing packaging. There's testers available in the in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and IIT Chennai. There are research which is down to 2 nanometer, 1 nanometer research papers, IEEE research papers, which are people are doing research on gate-all-around, which is the technology which is going to be used there. So there's a lot of work which happens, but for some reason does not make it into mainstream media and is not picked up by the social, I would use the term social search engines on the internet, and thus does not make it into the business analysts area, or is somehow just discounted because it happens in India. So I would like to bring this point out because there are companies, and I just told you, Tesol is large enough to buy a company out there. And nobody talked about a company called CDIL, Continental Devices India Limited, which white labels components for ST Microelectronics. CDIL has been running in India for more than 2 or 3 decades. They have manufacturing, get wafers from Southeast Asia somewhere. I don't have the exact details, but they make components. So if you look at the whole ecosystem, you have chips, and then you also have discrete components. Discrete components are also made on wafers. So those are larger volume sizes. They don't require deep ultraviolet lithography, but they still require medium ultraviolet lithography. So it might not need the argon fluoride lasers, it still need krypton fluoride lasers and below. So, and CDL is one company which is doing well. Has if it's white labeling for ST Micro, you can imagine that they are up in the game. But no one, I have never heard anybody talk about CDIL. I've never seen them in any conference. They are continuing to do their business. So there are companies and startups, some which are doing well, like I have one here, and there's some who are just enjoying the bandwagon of being in social media. Sir, I'm doing a startup. I said, okay, what are you doing? Sir, I'm waiting for my money to be released from Government of India. Why? Why didn't you go to a VC? It will be a shorter turnaround to get money from a VC than to wait to apply and get it from the Government of India. So you have both options. But you give me some signal. You are telling me something when you say, instead of going to a VC, you prefer to go to Government of India. There is a reason why you're doing that. And we as VCs, as investors, know exactly what the gameplay is. So let's look at it, let's be a little more serious, and let's be aware of what all India is doing. India is a large country, and we are doing a lot of things. Sorry, I got a little carried away with your specific question, but yes, packaging and testing and all is also happening in India and is on a growth pattern. I'm sure there are more companies which will come in the near future.
Okay, I think so. If there are some great messages here, it is, I mean, India has been traditionally extremely strong in designing of semiconductors, but as Chinnu early on said, unless we build a larger ecosystem of manufacturing, etc., even this system will suffer. So a lot of work is happening along those lines. The government itself is putting in a lot of effort, so we are heading in that direction. But still, there's value in focusing on the software side of things as well. NVIDIA's AI chip, etc., have demonstrated the kind of requirements that are coming up on the software side, building that into the stack. But investing in core science is still extremely important. Investing in skilling is still very important, especially as we get into manufacturing at the higher levels. We'll need all of those skills. So thank you all for a great discussion. Thank you, Anshuman, Chinnu, Gaudhadar, Manu. Great discussion.
Thank you.
A lot of new learnings, honestly. Phenomenal things
you so much.
happening here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.